Subcutting is really straightforward. So I'm just going to do a couple and leave you to it to finish all the rest of your subcuts from the width of fabric strips. I'm going to start with going down the pattern in order. I've got my 7 3-inch by width of fabric strips, and it tells me to take the first one. Whoopsie, get that out of here. And measure and cut it into 40.5. You can just fold it in half. Do it this way. Now, I need 40.5 as a total strip, but I've just folded it in half. So I will divide that by 2. Instead of 40.5, I'm going to do 20.25. I'm going to line that up on any one of these lines, both this way and the one going that way. I've counted 20.25. You're cutting the open ends. Obviously, if you cut that way, you would end up with 2 separate strips. So make sure before you cut. So these are now scrap, and I've got a perfect 40.5. I'm going to be cutting another one that's 40.5, but I'll grab my label 3 by 40.5. And then when I do the next one, I'll add it to it. Obviously, you know what you're doing now. So we just cut a couple 40.5-inch long strips. But then the next step says, out of strip 3, I want 2 20.5s. You could do it a couple ways. You could obviously cut a nice straight line, cutting off the selvage and creating a nice line there and doing 20.5 and 20.5. That's fine. I don't recommend, by the way, if you look ahead, strip 3 and strip 4, you're doing the same thing. So it might be tempting to layer them together. I don't recommend that. A lot more error of things not lining up. So let's use one strip at a time to lay it out. Now I only need, it's folded, so I'm going to get 2 20.5s, and I have plenty of room here, right? I've got 22.25-ish, 22. It's just going the opposite direction, if you will. I am going to cut the tiniest bit of the fold, right? Boop. Because now I have 2 separate pieces, and if we don't move them too much, or much at all, and I keep that on the grid line, now I can just do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20.5. Is that what it calls for? Yes. So 20, keep this sliding, 20.5. Just check that, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20.5. You can figure out the way that works best for you, but now I've got 2 separate strips, which are 20.5. I'm going to show you F3 since I have you. Let me put a label on this one so I don't forget. So if you look at F3 in the pattern, and the pattern's not really ready for turning into a PDF yet, so ignore all of my scribbles and notes to myself. But if you go down to F3, it says, we cut one big 10.5-inch strip, and then we're going to subcut it. And I want to show you just a little bit of what's going on there. And this is going to become the big square in the middle, and these 8 larger squares that go around the edges. I had you cut a 10.5-inch strip. So first, let's just cut the 10.5-inch square, because that's super easy. This is not folded. This is just, we need one square. That's going to be the big square in the middle. So I've lined this up on the grid. I've made sure it's nice and straight. Right now, I'm just cutting off the selvage and making a nice edge and making sure that it's going along the line. So, and we want it to be as square as possible. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and a half. This is not the tricky part. Actually, nothing's tricky, but I didn't want to leave you wondering what was up on this one. Okay, so we only need one of these. So that is 10 and a half by 10 and a half. I'm going to label that, set aside because it's done. So you're left with this 10 and a half inch strip, but as you can see, the subcuts, we did our 10 and a half inch square. Now we want 5 and a half inch squares, and we can fit 5 of them based on the length of the fabric. So before I cut those 5 and a half inch squares, I need to bring this strip down to 5 and a half. It's basically that simple. But I didn't want you to get there and be like, my strip is 10 and a half this way, and she's telling me to make 5 and a half inch squares. We'll fold it because my ruler isn't long enough for the whole width. And we're going to end up cutting off this selvage, but try to line it up as best you can. And again, it's a 10 and a half inch strip, and we only want 5 and a half. So I will line up my ruler at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half. So I'm going to put the line along the bottom, basically cutting a 5 and a half inch strip. And I can go ahead and cut off the selvage, get as close to it as you can because you don't want to run out of fabric. You should be fine though. And then you're going to cut 5 and a half inch squares. You'll get 5 out of this. And then in the next strip, it's already 5 and a half. So you'll do the remainder.